But in our first hour, should every politician have a budget for hookers when they go into public office? I know it sounds crazy, but listen along. Once they're sworn in, they get a chief of staff, a PR chief, 3 interns, and it's not just because I just came back from Reno, although, who knows. And a hooker. No, I didn't. It's interesting looking around, though. And a hooker. So we can get back to talking about the important issues that face us, like the meltdown of our economy, health care, global warming. Here's what got us thinking about this. Louise and Sean and I sitting around yesterday afternoon, what are we going to talk about in tomorrow's program as we're doing show prep? And again, the 4 hours we worked on it this morning. And Eliot Spitzer made the comment yesterday, I didn't fall in love. Speaking of the woman that he paid so well, at least he's paying local talent. He's not outsourcing it to Argentina. And he's paying, I guess. Some would argue there's not a benefit in that, and that's the question, I guess. He says, I didn't fall in love, implying that a purely sexual affair, a purely commercial affair is better than an affair of the heart. What do you think? I asked both Louise and Sean this question. If your husband or boyfriend or whatever, well, in both of their cases, their husband, if you discovered that they were having sex with a hooker or had fallen in love with somebody, which would be more devastating? And the answer in both cases was falling in love with somebody. I would feel the same way if it was the other way around. In Europe, prostitution is legal, condoned, and there's generally a different attitude. Mitterrand, for example, the president of France, his mistress Anne Pinot, I'm guessing is the French pronunciation, and her 20-year-old daughter, Mazarine, stood side by side, hand in hand, in silent farewell with his wife at his funeral. Nobody in France thought twice about it. In fact, it was expected. The role of the mistress in France has always been something of a celebrated institution. Being the king's official mistress had great compensations. Louis XV's mistress for 20 years, Madame de Pompadour, was installed in the sumptuous apartment at the Palace of Versailles. Wikipedia, the free online encyclopedia, notes that French royal mistresses like a laundry list to include such revered women like Diane de Poitiers, mistress of Henry II, and Madame du Barry, or however you say it, mistress of Louis XV. In all across Europe, most European countries, prostitution is legal. So over the weekend, this is really what brought this forward. Lindsey Graham on Face the Nation or Meet the Press, one of those shows, he was asked about Governor Mark Sanford. And Mark Sanford, who had called for Bill Clinton to be impeached. And you'll recall Rudy Giuliani saying, well, you've got people of both parties doing this. Yeah, but in the case of Mark Spitzer, or not Mark Spitzer, Eliot Spitzer, who was, nailed with a hooker, no pun intended, he resigned. Now, I don't frankly think he should have resigned, but he resigned. He said, okay, that's it, I'm out of here, I'm not the governor anymore. Because he was such a law and order guy, he applied it to himself. That was Governor Spitzer. In the case of Bill Clinton, he was impeached. The Republicans impeached him. Now, when David Vitter gets it on with a hooker, he gets a standing ovation from the Republican members of Congress, and he goes back in. Sanford says he wants to stay on as governor. Well, I mentioned Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham, they asked him, should he stay on? And he said, well, it depends on whether he works it out with his wife. When did that become an issue that has anything to do with governance? When John Ensign, after he admitted to an affair, went back into the Senate, and this was with a staffer, he got applause from his Republican colleagues. I mean, what's the deal here? If they're going to applaud it, why don't they just put a hooker budget into the senatorial salaries or into the senatorial staff, and that way they don't have to worry about this stuff. Perhaps we can have an office of hookers so we can get the sex scandals off the front page, get it out of the news, back to the gossip magazines, and put health care, the financial meltdown of the planet, global warming, and ending the war back on the front page, which is frankly where they belong. Speaking to the front page news, in an emailed statement to Bloomberg News, HHS Secretary Kathleen Sebelius said she'd consider dropping a public health insurance option in favor of medical insurance cooperatives. I mean, this is like saying, well, you know, every town can start its own auto manufacturer to compete with the big auto companies. Come on. She says you could theoretically design a co-op plan with the same attributes as a public plan. No, you can't. As Howard Dean says, the co-ops are too small to compete with the big private insurance companies. They'll kill the co-ops completely by undercutting them, using their financial clout to do it. Also, Senator Dianne Feinstein, she's being deluged. MoveOn.org is running ads saying, hey, Senator, get with the program. People listening to this program and others are calling her office and saying, single payer or public option, comprehensive, all-encompassing public option, do it. She says, I don't think this is helpful. This is a verbatim quote. I do not think this is helpful. It will not move me one whit. Senator Dianne Feinstein. Well, if it won't move you one whit, I wonder how many of the people who voted for you last time it won't move one whit. She said they're spending a lot of money on something that's not productive. Not productive being trying to convince her to what? Vote for a public option? Looks like big health care money trumps we the people and decides that health care is not a right, it's a privilege for those who can afford it. If we don't get a public health care component in, what are you going to do? How will you change how you think about politicians? Will you stay in the Democratic Party? Will you vote for Democrats in the future? I mean, is this that much of a touchstone of an issue? I think it may well be.